Hello fellow British sports car enthusiasts. You may notice that there's a tiny piece missing from this Triumph Spitfire. It's a little piece I like to call the engine. It's also attached to the gearbox, which is why the engine came out. So today we're going to take a look at how to pull apart the gearbox, what's inside it, how do you take measurements on it, and we're going to go through and basically rebuild the unit. And while the engine's out, it's really not going to hurt to take some measurements there either. So that will be in a future video, but you can count on that one as well. So we are digging into the heart of this car. Let's get started. Okay, so the reason that the gearbox is up on a couple of blocks is even after you drain it from the car, there's always going to be a little bit more oil left in it. And I pulled this out a few days ago, so basically I just let it sit open with a little tray underneath just to catch anything else that came out. There's still going to be plenty of oil inside, but it's a good way to get it started. So anyway, first thing that you want to do, I'll get it off these blocks. First thing that we're going to want to do is to separate the overdrive from the transmission itself. So these are 7/16 bolts. We'll start just by breaking all of them loose. There are 8 of these. Now, if you have a TR6 transmission, when you go to remove the overdrive, you have to be a little bit careful because there are 2 of the studs that are going to be a lot longer than the other ones, and that's because the overdrive is held away from the transmission by springs. It's it's directly put in. So when you undo it, you need to undo the shorter ones first and then slowly let onto the long ones so the overdrive can kind of separate itself. But that shouldn't be the case with this, but still on the off chance that I'm wrong, because I've not done a D-type overdrive, you're going to see me loosening all of these slowly. Of course, it goes without saying you want to make sure that the outside of the gearbox is reasonably clean. I mean, say I'm already a mess here, but you want to be able to see what you're doing. You don't want to lose pieces. And this bolt's butting up against the end. So the next step, we're going to get a hammer. Soft-faced one, by the way. Rubber mallet's perfect for this. Now we'll bring one of our blocks back because we want to support the back of the transmission. Might be a little too high. And there we go. Should come apart nice and easy. Do not force anything apart. I mean, kind of goes without saying, just like usual. Remaining bolt. Now the overdrive and transmission are separate. For now, set the overdrive aside. The next step, first get the excess oil off of this. Try to keep your workspace neat, obviously. And the next step is going to be inside the bell housing, so I'll turn this around. See it? Okay, we want to remove the clutch components. Okay, now how the clutch operates, when you step on the pedal, what you're basically doing is pushing this sleeve forward. It carries the release bearing, forces the clutch to bend, and it basically separates two surfaces that hold the clutch disc together with friction. So that's what you're doing, is you're moving this. And so a couple of pieces that are important, you want to make sure that this bearing, anytime you're going anywhere near the clutch, throw this out. Do not reuse it. It's a pain in the butt to pull the transmission. Don't just leave it in there, it's false economy. And the other bit is there is a pin that goes through here, and that's kind of what holds everything together. So this pin can end up getting loose, but you want to use a metal punch like this, just drive it out, and then the whole thing should come out as a unit. So I'll show you that. Okay. Nice and easy does it. You notice those choked up on the hammer. You don't need a whole lot of force. Just keep tapping it, and that's the pin. So with that out, there's nothing holding the sleeve in place. You just withdraw it in its entirety. We're going to set this aside too, because we're going to want to replace that and take care of some odds and ends here. Next, it wants us to take off the remote control housing, which I've already done, and the top cover, which I've rebuilt in another video for you. So I won't show you that this time, but we still need to take it off. There's one bolt here, but you're going to have to get rid of the reverse switch first. And by the way, a wrench on these is great, but it's a little bit too thin of an area to fit it in. So I find that just a pair of pliers, don't crank down on it, but just a pair of pliers, if you can get a grip. Just crank down a little bit. There we go. Just get it loose, then you can undo the rest by hand. Okay, set that aside. You can get the rest of the bolts. Okay, now let's start to stay organized here. Now here's a quick tip for you. If you're going to be rebuilding a transmission, one of the things that you want to make sure you do is stay organized. There's going to be a lot of little bolts and nuts lying around. You want to make sure you know where they all go when you go to put the thing back together again. And so you can get a box like this, and most hardware stores will have it. These I think I picked up from Harbor Freight, but you can pretty much get it anywhere, Amazon, what have you. And what I usually do is I just put a strip of tape over the top of each box, and then you could just use a permanent marker, write it down, and when you're done with the project, either rip the tape off or just put a new piece on top of it, and you can use it for a different project. So this tool is going to be your best friend. Now at this point we'd be taking out the speedometer drive and the output flange. You basically unscrew the nut and then get it off. It's similar to pulling out a gear. The speedometer drive, there's a nut for a little tab that holds it in, and then you need to pull out the drive hole. But because this is an overdrive transmission, those pieces that are on the overdrive, we're going to address those later. Just be aware that you have to do it if you have a non-overdrive transmission. Okay, we're ready to lift off the cover. Now that we have a place to put them, we can take these bolts out and set them aside in a place where we know we can put them back. This, by the way, not every gearbox will have this. This is an overdrive switch, and what it does is it sits here, and when you shift into specific gears, a little tab on the end of the shaft will press on this button. It will connect these two wires. There's supposed to be another one over here, but I took that off already. It'll connect these two, and then that's your interlock. So the overdrive will only go on if you're in third or fourth gear. Any other gear, it's not going to be in a position to push this down. That's how it locks out of overdrive. If the overdrive is engaging in any gear that's not third or fourth, or in some cases, like if you have a TR6 with an A-type overdrive, might engage in second, but generally speaking, if it's engaging in every gear, stop. You do not want the overdrive engaging in reverse. You will grenade your transmission, so it's just something to be aware of. Remember to use a soft-faced hammer. This one's lead, but a rubber mallet works just as well. Now you would take the extension off. In the case of an overdrive transmission, it's going to be this adapter. For the next step, and for a few others, you're going to want the transmission to be kind of upright, and so that's a little bit difficult because you've got this shaft that's coming out of the bell housing, right, your input shaft, and so that's going to be basically in the way. So you need to make it vertical. If you don't care about your workbench, I guess drill a hole in it, but alternatively you can use some blocks of wood, but it's a bit more stable if you've got a specific type of workbench. You can pick them up, again, Home Depot or Harbor Freight, pretty much anywhere. Let me show you what I mean. And an important tip, if you care about your floor at all, and because I'm married and working in the basement, I do, put something down, because these next steps you're going to get the floor a bit dirty with some oil. Again, soft face hammers on all of these. If you use anything, oh, I forgot a bolt. If you use anything that's made of steel, you're going to end up breaking the housing. And you are going to damage something that you probably can't replace because they don't make anymore. You want all of those pieces to be clean before you go trying to reassemble it. Diesel fuel works great if you have, for example, a parts washer. Just be aware that it's flammable, so there's other things that you can use too, but that's what I've got in my garage. There's also some industrial cleaners that do a very good job. You just have to be careful, read the product safety list, and don't sue me for whatever you use. Just get the grease and oil off of it. You want to remove the reverse idler gear. And if you just move the reverse lever, you can see it kind of coming up and down. It's a 1/2-inch bolt over here. That holds in the reverse shaft. Undo the bolt on the side. That bolt, by the way, just goes through here, so it holds in the shaft. And you probably won't be able to get reverse gear out, but at least now it's out of the way. So now it's time to get the bell housing off. And something that's very important is this lay shaft can fall out, so get something under it before you flip everything. And that way it'll be supported so that you can access the bolts. Interestingly, this bolt just came out from here. The bottom of the gearbox is right on this side. There is a copper washer that goes around one of these bolts that actually belongs at the bottom because that's where the oil is going to be leaking out. And I don't believe that it was replaced with one as I'm looking at these bolts. No, it certainly was not. So make sure when you put the bolts back in, copper washer goes at the bottom. Once the bolts are out, get your soft face hammer. I've got a rawhide one here. Jostle it loose and you can lift the bell housing right off. Next we're ready to take out the lay shaft. That's this right here. And you're going to want to flip it over before you can take it out, at least with this style of transmission. The later ones, I think, there may be a tab in there, but anyway. You'll want a piece of wood. That's the same diameter as the lay shaft. Cut it so that it will fit inside your gearbox. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to push it out the other end. And then that way, all of the gears will be on our temporary lay shaft. You could use an old one, or like I said, just go find a piece of wood from Home Depot, and that'll work just fine. Let's loosen this up. And just push it straight in. And as you can see, the old one's coming out. There you have it. Wipe that down, set it aside. And while you're looking at it, you want to look for scoring or feel if there's any scratching going on. This piece is notorious for just being junk, and so plan on replacing it. I don't recommend buying your pieces in advance because you never know what you're going to need, but when you strip it down, you're very likely going to find that the lay shaft is crap. And right here, I don't know if we can see it close up on the camera, let's see. Right here, by my thumb, you can see there's a little bit of scratching. I was having some noise that was in any gear, and that's what we were looking at right there. That little bit of wear can cause all sorts of problems and just make driving kind of a miserable experience. So this is junk. I'm going to need a new one, and let's press on. Okay, couple things of note. First of all, now that we've got the lay shaft out, you want to make sure that the temporary lay shaft and everything that was on it dropped down. So the way to make sure of that, spin the main shaft, and if the lay shaft's not turning or touching, you know it worked. Another thing, as you can see right in here, somebody obviously used some kind of a sealant. This looks like a silicone sealant. It's all the way around. You've got a bunch of goop that's on the internals of the transmission. That's not good. If you are going to use a sealant, that's okay. I don't necessarily like the silicone stuff. It does a great job at stopping leaks, but the problem is when you tighten everything down and it squishes it out, you can wipe it off the outside, but you're still going to have stuff like this on the inside of the transmission, and if a piece of that falls off, well, now you've got stuff floating around. It's even worse inside of the engine when you do something like this, because a gear might be able to chew up a piece of silicone, but in an engine this could block an oil passage. So the same is going to be true, by the way, with an overdrive. This can block something, and so you really want to be careful. Don't use a whole lot of silicone, just a very tiny amount, if any at all, and there are probably some better sealants to use than that. So the next thing is that you can see this front gear isn't turning when we spin the rest of the shaft. So it's actually separate. There's a little bearing on the inside of there. That's also, by the way, in a GT6, something that's famous for making noise. But we want to get this input shaft out. When I say brass drift, I mean it. You could pick up brass kind of rods like this at Home Depot. You can also buy the actual tool, which is just a little bit thicker ones. You can get them in a range of sizes and lengths. These are going to be great. They will be your best friend. And you have to use brass, because if you're going to use steel, you are going to break something. Do not use a steel drift. Maybe, see, you can see it's moved quite a piece, moved quite a bit. You can try and get something underneath here to leverage it a little bit. A couple of screwdrivers work great. Just don't do one, kind of jerk it. You want two so you can get a more smooth motion, and as you can see, I did a moment ago. There. There you have it. You can see by the little brass shavings on here that, by the way, are coming right off of my finger. But you can see with the little brass shavings, if I had used steel, that's going to dig in all these teeth. So the next thing to do is to take a very careful look at this. Wash it up first, but take a careful look at this. You want to make sure all the teeth are clean. We're going to be doing that as part of our inspection in a few minutes. Okay, now turning to the inside. There's the cage bearing that I was talking about. This one always goes bad, especially in GT6s. This is a Spitfire box, but anyway. Take off the couple pieces that you can get at pretty easily. There's a synchro ring. And then you just want to get the bearing started. So brass drift, a little bit larger one is okay now. Just give it a couple of taps. Then you'll be able to see that the whole shaft has kind of started to push the bearing out, so it's going to make things a bit easier later. Now to get the rear bearing out, we are going to want to take off a circlip here. This is the oil pump drive for the overdrive. But if you don't have an overdrive, there's probably a circlip here anyway, and it's for the speedometer gear. So either way, get that out. Making sure to snap your fingers in the process so that it really, really hurts. And screwdrivers really help here. Just be sure to ease it off slowly, because otherwise it'll go flying on you. Piece that fell out right there is a Woodruff key, and that's what keeps this in position and driving with the shaft, so keep those together. Then you're going to have another circlip and reverse gears in the way again. Does come out yet? Too much stuff in the way. Okay. Watch out for reverse gear, by the way. Some of these are studs, by the way, and they'll just thread out. Not in every transmission, but in this one they are. Still need a little more travel. Go. Circlip for the bearing is out. Remove as many of these as I can by hand here. Get them out of the way. Note whether one side has longer threads. It's always a good practice. I'm going to put it in the same way. Try and get this bearing out. Ouch. Let's try and get the bearing out with a longer screwdriver. Always protect your thumbs. That's just a gasket. By the way, there are almost definitely better tools for this, but not everybody has them. So this is one way to make do. Wood paint stirrer, by the way, will help so that you're not scoring up anything. This is just a piece of gasket that needs to go away anyway. So rear bearing. Again, you want to keep everything in kind of order there. And anything that will fall off, take it off now so that it doesn't fall on the floor. Okay, now that you can tilt this, make sure the camera's still in focus here. Okay, that's the trick to getting the synchro ring out, which I've just learned now actually. Is you want to push this piece out from the selector. You'll put those back together later. Now there's a bit more room. Synchro ring. With the bearing off, this all slides right out. You just have to tilt it up. Careful not to lose any pieces. You disassemble it in a moment. Just before taking the leg gear out, you want to make sure that you know how much end play it has, and so you're going to need a feeler gauge. Let's pick one to start with. It doesn't really matter what it is necessarily, but You want to raise it back up to normal position and then see how small of a gauge you can get in there. Just go progressively smaller until one happens to fit. Looks like about 6/1000ths. With everything out of the transmission, now you're ready to clean everything up, and then we're going to be doing some measurements so that you can buy all of your thrust washers and everything all at once. And stay tuned because we're going to be attacking the overdrive too in a different video. So if you happen to have an overdrive transmission, watch that one too, and then you'll have an idea of what parts you need to get for the whole assembly.